I know you've been here today. Are you aware of the number of Burmese or Rohingya refugees coming to Australia?
Yes, I know this is a big global issue these days, and it's a difficult one for us. And I would like to echo what Bill Clinton said, the retired president of the United States, when he was in Burma recently, that the world has so much goodwill towards our country, but they were sickened by the resolution of differences through violence. I feel that he's very right. What we want is a society where differences can be settled without violence. My party is totally dedicated to non-violence. Violence has been committed against us again and again, repeatedly, not over a year, not over two, but over nearly 30 years. But we never retaliated with violence. So I'm unhappy that there should be those in my country who believe that differences can be settled only through violence.
But you know only too well the impact of violence on people's lives. Some people have chosen to try to come to Australia. Do you think we have an obligation to accept those people, to offer them a new home?
That is your policy, but what I would like to say is that the government of my country has an obligation to protect everybody in it, that they must make sure that there is rule of law that will give everybody security. We cannot have peace without security. I have said repeatedly that unless our people all feel secure, you can't expect them to sit down and sort out their differences. People who are afraid of being killed, or people who are afraid of their property being attacked, are not going to sit down and talk sensibly to one another. And I do not think that the government has been responsible enough in establishing rule of law.
I think you're referring to the situation in relation to the Rohingyas particularly.
All over the country, I think there's a tremendous lack of rule of law. We do not have an independent judiciary. It is very much under the executive in accordance with the provisions of the Constitution. And we do not have the kind of independence among the different departments and at the local level, and independence and transparency and accountability. Yeah. We do not have these, and without that, we can't have rule of law. And without rule of law, we cannot expect our people to settle their differences peacefully and sensibly.
There are those in recent months that have expressed criticism towards you and have expressed disappointment that you have not been more vocal in relation to the Rohingyas, in defending them.
I have always defended those whose human rights have been attacked. But what people want is not defense, but condemnation. Particularly, they're saying, why am I not condemning this group, or why am I not condemning that group? And it also applies to the military. Why am I not condemning the military? I'm not condemning because I have not found that condemnation brings good results. What I want to do is to achieve national reconciliation. It's very interesting. In those days, back from 1988 until a year or two ago, when the military regime was very, very severe, and when we talked about national reconciliation, everybody agreed because they thought it was not achievable. But now, when we talk about national reconciliation in very, very simple, practical terms of trying to work out our differences instead of condemning one another, then people don't like it. So there's an inconsistency. When they thought national reconciliation was just a pipe dream, they were ready to support it. But now many who supported national reconciliation as a goal do not seem to be very keen on practicing national reconciliation, which means, as I said, trying to sort out our differences without resorting to condemnation or violence.
Do you think that reconciliation requires offering the Rohingyas citizenship as Rohingyas?
Reconciliation requires talking to both communities, finding out what their fears are. I believe that hate and fear are linked. They are opposite sides of the same coin. And as long as there's hate and fear, there cannot be reconciliation. There cannot be a sorting out of the differences without violence. Violence comes out of hate and fear.
The citizenship laws are an important point, though.
Of course, this is why I say that these should be discussed sensibly, with cool heads, and not out of fear or not out of hate.
In relation to Australia, there is this young child, Farouz, a boy that was born a short time ago. He was separated from his mother a few days after his birth, and the family, we understand, may be sent to Nauru or to Papua New Guinea, countries that we have agreements with for accepting asylum seekers. Do you think that that's appropriate for Australia to send this child away when he's ill, when the family has come and tried to seek asylum here?
Do you have rule of law in Australia?
We do.
Well, in that case, you must sort out these problems within the framework of rule of law, but always remembering that justice has to be tempered by mercy.
I think in a moment we'll take some questions from the audience. So if you do have a question, please move to one of the 6 microphones around the auditorium. I'll give you a few moments to do that. So please get your questions ready. All right, let's turn to microphone 4.
Minglaba Misu, Siniani Roma Josuaraknya. My name is Osman Ma, and I'm from Burmese Muslim community here in Australia. And apparently my question will be around the recent religious tension in Burma, particularly the religious violence against Muslim minority group in Burma. Do you think these recent violence and unrest and tension between these different religious groups are actually plots by the current government against you and your party to politically assassinate you, destroy your political cause? If you think so, what you and your parties are doing to defuse the situation? And when you talk about national reconciliation, does this also cover, reconciliation between different religious groups? Because I think at the moment there are some, fear against each other and mistrust against each other between like the different religious groups. And what do you think, a country like Australia can do to help, calm the situation? So sorry to ask you too many questions, but
right. Well, Burma is not yet, as I said earlier, a country where transparency is overwhelming. It's not totally transparent, and it's not totally open. And because of that, there are always many conspiracy theories. I know that there have been speculation with regard to why these communal violence has been taking place, the communal riots and the tension, whether these have been promoted by those who wish to derail the 2015 elections or to make sure that the NLD does not win the 2015 elections. But these are just speculation. There is no solid evidence that any particular group is working towards such an end. On the other hand, there's no evidence either that any particular group is not working towards such an end. So we have to hope for the best and prepare for the worst. But what is important is that the government must take responsibility for any violence that takes place in the country, anything that happens that is contrary to the laws of the land. As I said earlier, I do not think that the government has taken enough responsibility with regard to that. And certainly when I talk about national reconciliation, I mean reconciliation among all groups, among all peoples, among organizations, among political forces. This is why I say that when I think of national reconciliation, I include reconciliation between the military and the civilian political forces everywhere. But in order to promote this kind of national reconciliation, we need not just Australia, but the world to give us more understanding. This is why I said earlier that behind all these communal tensions are great fears and hatred. And to remove these, the government must create an atmosphere of security. If people do not feel secure, you will not be able to make them let go of their hatred and their fear. So I want our people to live in peace. We have not forgotten, I have not forgotten, certainly, that we achieved our independence in 1948 through reconciliation between different ethnic nationalities, with the involvement of different religious groups, with the involvement of different political organizations. It was through national solidarity that we achieved our independence. And I believe that it is only through national solidarity that we will be able to achieve true democracy for our country. So Australia and the rest of the world must try to help us to achieve this reconciliation. They must also remind the present government that it is responsible for peace and rule of law in our country. If they want us to be responsible, they'd better make us government.
Just on further to that question, Human Rights Watch described that violence as ethnic cleansing. Do you accept that analysis of it?
No, I think these kind of expressions do not help, because it does intensify fears and hatreds. Yes, there has been violence, and there is continuing violence, and there is great anxiety in our country that these outbreaks of communal tension and strife should come to an end. But when you use terms like ethnic cleansing, which I think is a little extreme, it just plays into the hands of extremists. There are extremists on both sides. They're very few. It's usually the minority. We only have very few extremists, but they can exercise great power over those who are frightened.
Let's go over to microphone 6.
Hello. What is it? Hi. Sorry, I forgot.
Do you want a minute to think?
In Burma,
He's a man, he needs time to think.
Sorry. In Burma, we have a conflict between Buddhist majority, 96%, and Muslim minorities, 4%. So they got continuing conflict. And in previous interview, you said that there are fears on both sides. And there are the lack of rule of laws, and the government is responsible, and they need to implement it. But that's one side. And your mother soon, and you are the only hope and inspirations for all our Burmese people. And may I ask that, have you been implementing, or do you have any plan to promote peaceful coexistence of all people inside Burma, regardless of race or religions? Thank you very much.
Well, we have been doing this over the last 30 years because, as I said, we started out with 3 pillars: democracy, human rights, and national reconciliation. If all these 3 could be constructed strongly, then we would have peace and harmony in our land, because human rights would be respected, everybody would enjoy their democratic rights, and there would be understanding between different communities, between different races. And now at the moment, as the chair of the Committee for Rule of Law, I'm trying my best to build a harmonious society through rule of law. And while I'm about it, could I say that we're trying to establish rule of law centers all over the country, and that will require a lot of help in services as well as in funding. So anybody who would like to help with the establishment of rule of law in Burma, please get in touch with my committee through the legislature. Thank you.
Thank you, Amazing.
Yes.